Yo, what's up everybody? It's Drewberry, and it is no secret that the meta right now is a bit frustrating, right? Well, luckily, right around the corner, we have a new season on January 2nd. The January season will start, and according to the history of balance changes, usually Team Second Dinner will either put out a patch the week before a season changes, or in the more recent iterations, they've been doing it at the day of a season change. So, I think we can safely assume that the watch list that Ben Brode has kind of hinted at, or whatever they got brewing up, is coming on January 2nd with the new season. Now, we don't know exactly what this entails, but I'm sure that there are going to be some nerfs. I think that's the biggest thing here. So I have some nerfs, some buffs, some reworked cards, and some series adjustments, because I believe that that greatly impacts the meta as well. I have a bunch of predictions, or at least some changes that I would like to see to the game to make a bit of a healthier state. But I would love to hear what you guys think about these changes that I'm proposing here in the comments below, or some other changes maybe that I missed that you would like to see in the game. So let me know below. All right, so one of the first ones I have is Arrow, and this breaks my heart because I absolutely love this card. This Arrow is so much fun to play, but she's undoubtedly like one of the better cards in the game right now. And it's funny because we only discovered this a little bit later on in Marvel Snap's lifespan, but she actually used to be a 5/6 for the longest time. I'd say like 3 to 4 months, and then she got buffed up to power, I think right before global launch, and she became 5/8, and then she got played a lot more. And I think a lot of people play Arrow not because of her power, but because of her effect. So I think if we drop her back down to her original power level, 2 power reductions, that's a sizable difference, but I think she still sees a lot of play. It doesn't ruin the card. Still very effective, but just a little bit better. Feels a little bit better when you pull over those big turn 6 plays, and maybe you don't have enough power at that location that you pulled to at the Arrow location. That's not even her best application. Usually you don't care about the location you're pulling the cards to. You're trying to win the other ones. So I think it still all works. I think a 2 power reduction is pretty fair. Speaking of more power reduction, let's look at Killmonger. Also, I made a lot of these just power reductions because it tends to be how Team Second Dinner likes to approach their balance changes, which is fine. They're big impacts to the game. You change one card's power by 1, it actually will make or break the card. It's happened before where we just don't see cards because they got nerfed by just a few power points. But let's talk about Killmonger. So Killmonger is the 3/3. He's going to destroy all your 1-cost cards. I think that's just a little bit too much value. Sometimes that can equate to like 12 plus power on a 3-cost card. And also it just completely destroys flood decks that want to play a bunch of 1-cost cards and then Khazar or something like that. You never see that card anymore because of this. So I feel like Killmonger needs a change. He's also the most played card according to Snap.fan statistics. So he's just way too abundant because the value is just there, even if your opponent only plays a couple of 1-cost cards. So let's not like ruin it. I think he's like kind of balanced. Like, if your opponent doesn't play 1-cost cards, then it's fine. The other application is destroying your own stuff, which is really valuable in destroy decks. But let's just reduce his power by 1, see what happens. Let's not take out the Nerf bat and completely destroy this card. Just 1 power less. His value is still through the roof, right? You're still playing this card in a lot of decks because it's going to seriously disrupt your opponent or benefit destroys on your side of the field. But he's just not as much of a power on his position. So when you play him at that location, maybe it's not going to end up with the most power. I feel like just 1 is good enough. All right, and then we have Sarah. So Sarah, she's just always been a problem card, man. Like she's always been a problem because she is cost reduction, and I'm super nervous about the January card that's going to come out because it has to do with reducing the cost of certain cards. But Sarah here is cards in your hand cost 1 less. She's a 5-cost card. You can't really make this 4-cost, give her like no power, because then there's just crazy combos that can happen if you get her out sooner. We already see that with cheating her out sooner than this. And you can't make her a 6-cost because then she has no value. You'd have to like somehow play Magic and then have a turn 7. So she's very, very difficult to balance. She also works really well in Sarah negative decks where she gets flipped, and if you reduce her power too much, she's going to be even more value. But KM Best, one of the best Snap players in the world, had mentioned that doesn't really matter. Sarah actually got worse when she lost 1 power point in the Sarah negative decks. So I think my suggestion is just try it again. Reduce her by 1 power again. Maybe she gets too crazy in those decks. We have to revisit this once more in a February patch. I don't know. But that's my suggestion because it's a very difficult card to change. But my original suggestion from my previous balance patch prediction video is that I still think she should go back to 5.5 and be a minimum of 2. And if you're like, that's crazy, it'll kill the card, fine, dude, kill this card. Honestly, just get it out of here for a little while. And if we want to bring it back, we can bring it back to minimum 1 later on. But at least just change it for the interim so that we can play some different decks, because it seems like she's in everything. That's a bit of a strong opinion, but I think like some cards like these just got to go. And there's obviously one later on that we'll get to. Let's get to part 2 here. All right, so nerfs part 2. So I still got armor here. I still would like to see a power reduction in armor. I think it's just too annoying. It's too powerful for a 2-3. Like, I feel like if you're going to have a bonus effect on the card and the ongoing title, which gets a lot of buffs from like Spectrum and stuff like that, then you should probably not have premium stats or like a vanilla stat line like 2-3. So why don't we make it a 2-2? I feel like that's fair. It still gets played. It still has its application. Just 1 power reduction feels fair to me. Silver Surfer is another one I'd like to see get 1 less power, you know? Like, he's so much power for his cost. Like, he's really changed the meta game right now. For the big turn 6, you play like 1 of the 3 costs, or you play Sarah on turn 5, then you play 3 costs, including Silver Surfer. You get a whole whack of power. It's just crazy. But you know what? He works in negative decks. So if we make him -1, it doesn't make that's not a difference. We don't have to worry about that, right? He's already doing the thing in negative decks if that's how you want to play it. Why don't we just make him -1 power? I feel like that's pretty fair. You're not trying to buff usually at the location you play Silver Surfer anyways. You're trying to buff the other locations where you've committed your 3-cost cards, because he doesn't buff himself. So I think it's pretty fair to just make a little bit more of a crippled location by playing Silver Surfer there, giving your opponent an opportunity to maybe beat the power output that Silver Surfer is doing at another location. So you win those 2. And then my last nerf that I have for you guys is the one I more and more think needs to happen, and that is Cosmo. And I know I've seen a lot of back and forth on my tech video and just other people talking on other channels, and Cosmo's fine. You need Cosmo. I'm not saying we don't need Cosmo. We need Cosmo. Cosmo is vital to the game. You need a counter to on reveals. Should it look like a 3-3 good stat line and have an ongoing ability that's literally not being able to be countered? No, I don't think so. You cannot counter Cosmo. You can counter all the other tech cards in the game, but you cannot counter Cosmo. So how is that fair? I just feel like that's not fair to have that in the game. And then on top of that, Cosmo counters over 100 cards in Marvel Snap. There's 108 on reveal cards. He's going to counter them all. Like, it's just crazy. Like, he's got to be one of the #1 cards that if Cosmo hits your on reveal play, you retreat. So the game just ends. Like, it just feels way too bad for me, but we need him, right? He should be in the game. There's a variety of ways that we could change him, and I think I took the easiest and kindest route in just making him 4. Because think about the other tech cards, Enchantress, Shang-Chi, right? They all cost 4, and they're doing their thing, you know? So I think people would still run Cosmo. He'd still be running the Destroyer deck, because you want to play your Destroyer there and not have his on reveal happen. You still use it against like Wong things, because let's say they play Wong, you play Cosmo at the same time, right? Maybe you have priority on turn 5, you play Cosmo. Like, why don't we just make it 4 so it's a little bit less of an always in every deck option, right? I think that's the worst part of it for me, is that tech cards should be the last card that you put in your deck, but people are just putting in Cosmo and then building around it. Like, there's just tech decks right now, and it's way too much, way too abundant. I think all the tech cards need a bit of a change. And that's why all these deck cards are on my nerf watch list, you know? That's why I'm proposing some nerfs to these guys. So I would like to see some of these changes. But let's also talk about some buffs. All right, so when I was filtering through my collection, looking at the cards that I think could be buffed, I gotta say, I was looking through them and I was like, you know what? There's actually not that many cards that I would buff. We're in a pretty decent spot right now. You know, even like some weaker cards that you might think don't have a good position or have a low win rate, like Yellow Jacket, for instance, they have their deck that they can work in, you know? Or maybe a card like Black Bolt, right? Black Bolt doesn't see any play. He's kind of garbage, not a very good stat line. Effect is kind of weak. Well, there's actually going to be there's data mine cards that are going to come out that will actually buff him up. So it's like, maybe we don't change them now, because in the future they'll actually find their home. So here's 3 cards I think that could use a little bit of a change, and I think I kept it pretty simple here. M'Baku and Angel are like the same thing, okay? So I just thought, I look at these cards, they have terrible win rates, they're never played. What could we do to change that? And I thought the most simple thing is, instead of always being restricted to your deck and making it feel like the worst draw in the world, why don't we make it so that they fly out whatever athletic method that they want, okay? Just get out of my hand into the board. That would be great. That means you're ending the game and you're not feeling too bad about M'Baku being in your hand because you probably didn't play him. Instead, he'll actually jump out. And then that's +2 power, and it's pretty valuable, and you don't have to play. Maybe that's broken. Maybe the deck is like what's offsetting them, but I think it'd be pretty fair. And then the destroy package, you might actually start to run Angel because you can like destroy the stuff reliably and get Angel out there from your hand. That could be good. Still not a great draw. You draw this and you're kind of going, bummer. Like, it would have been better if it was in my deck and then it came out, because then I would get good draws. So I don't see this as being like a big, like, whoa, now we're running these cards all the time. It's like, no, like, really, think about it. When are you still going to put M'Baku in your deck? He doesn't have like synergistic abilities outside of those few applications that I mentioned. Yeah, Lockjaw Cycles, I've tried it. It's okay. He's not the game breaker changer, okay? Angel, he often cut and destroy decks. Very often. It's run in early destroy decks in like series 1 and 2, but once you get into 3 with a full collection, you really start to cut Angel almost every time, and he has a terrible win rate. So I feel like these changes would just be enough to give them a little bit more viability. You can't give them more power because then they're like a very good stat line with a decent ability, and you just can't do that in Snap. So I feel like this small change would maybe bring them back to life. And then speaking of coming back to life, we got the Guardians of the Galaxy cards essentially, but I'm looking at Drax the most. He's the least played, worst win rate. I'd like him to just get an extra power. You know, Gamora's a 5/7 gets to 12. He's a 4/4 get to 8. Like, there's a big gap between the two, and you can't really have a 4 that gets to a 10 if you hit, because maybe that's actually too good. I don't know. You look at Typhoid Mare, she has a terrible effect, but even then she has synergistic cards. You know, there's like Odin and Wong, I guess, with Drax, but all in all, you're paying a lot. You gotta hope that you hit, and then you get a decent power output. So I feel like just giving him 1, making him a 4/9, it's like, oh, all of a sudden it's not that bad of a play. Probably still doesn't see play because the Guardians of the Galaxy are just kind of tied to what your opponent does. It's not always the most reliable. Some of the earlier ones are worth it, you know, like Rocket and Star-Lord, because it's not too expensive to play. Whereas Drax, like, geez, you gotta hit it. So if he has base power increase, not increase to his abilities power, I feel like then it doesn't feel so bad if you miss, right? Kind of. I don't know. It still kind of feels bad. He's lower than the Thing, which is the vanilla stat line. So anyways, I thought that was an interesting change, but that's all I got for buffs. I feel like for the most part, a lot of the cards are in decent positions. Even like Crystal, she's draw, man. Like, how can you really change Crystal that much, even though she's one of the worst cards? Like, there's a lot of the lower cards that I think will get better over time, or have new cards released that synergize with them. It might bring them to life. But we're not done just yet. I got some really interesting reworks and series adjustments. So let's get into the reworks. All right, here they are. Now, I bet there's going to be people that look at the first slide of this video and go, what? You're not nerfing leader? Well, guess what? I am, but we're changing them so much that I felt like I had to put it here and not in just the simple little nerfs, 1 power changes. You know what I'm saying? So we got leader. There's a bunch of ways we could change this card. I've seen people talking about it non-stop. He undoubtedly needs a change. You know, everybody's calling for a nerf. Everybody hates this card. Regis Kilbin recently did a video on the most hated card, and this one won by a landslide. He said compared to any of his other videos of doing Hearthstone for his entire career of like the last 5 years, this was the most lopsided vote that he has ever seen. And so people hate leader. It needs to change. So I was trying to think of ways to change leader and not ruin the card entirely. I'm fine with it if it gets ruined, but usually Team Secondary doesn't like to do that. So what could they do to make it like still alive? Some people do enjoy this card. I don't know who they are. They're probably like green. But regardless, I thought of this idea. I thought this was reasonable. On reveal, copy all cards your opponent revealed this turn, but on your side. So there's a few kickers to this, right? First of all, priority, right? You have to ensure as the leader player that your opponent has priority. If they don't, this is a dead card because they will not have revealed anything and you would only get 4 power. So that's crazy, right? That's a huge change on its own right. You have to play for not having priority. Then that also means you're behind. So then the leader play might not even be that good, might not even get you over the hump, might not let you win. Maybe this kills the card. I don't know. The other thing is, if your opponent wants to hide cards, maybe Dark Dimension as the location, but also Invisible Woman, right? To hide things away. It could be Invisible Woman could end up being a tech counter to leader. So I don't know. Maybe literally this small change in text from played to revealed changes way too much and it becomes a dead card. But hey, are we really that upset about it? I thought this was reasonable. If you play without priority, then you get a really good value. You still get the same value that you'd get for leader right now. So maybe this kills it. I mean, we could have changed the power. We could have made it so that it can't be played on turn 6. It's a 5 cost that can only be played on turn 5 or earlier if you cheat it out. I thought that would be okay, but then you can own it on top of that, and that's just annoying. I don't know. It's a weird card. Maybe we just kill it. Maybe we trash it. I don't know. All right, and the other one I want to talk about is Mr. Negative. People probably don't think this deserves a nerf because it's a bit high rolly and not a lot of people see it that often. But let's face it, when somebody sidelocks into Mr. Negative on turn 3, you're probably retreating because it's just insane after that. It's just insane. And I feel like every single month he becomes an issue. And it's either an issue of we need to nerf this card because there's a broken deck, you negatize the deck, it's just broken. Or if you want to create a cool new card or a card is released like Silver Surfer, all of a sudden everybody's chanting Mr. Negative, good and Mr. Negative. It's just too much for me. It's constraining and choking the life out of the design space in this game. And I think it just needs to die. Anyway, so I thought let's bring it back to a 4-1 or bring it back to a 4-4. I only say these 2 stat lines because they were past stat lines that Mr. Negative used to be in the past. But then we make it so that he only swaps the power and cost of your next draw. Now there's actually kind of some benefits. You guarantee the negatized card, right? It's going to be your next draw, so it's not too bad. I mean, if you negatize the entire deck, it's always going to be your next draws, but this limits it to 1, which you're still getting that 1 card. If it's Iron Man, then it's epic. But essentially the idea is no more crazy turn 6, a bunch of negatized cards, no big swings. Honestly, with this stat, I feel like we could have made it 4-4. I'm putting it as 4-1 just because, but I feel like it could have been back to a 4-4, negatize the next card that you draw, and just leave it at that. Now we're not talking about Mr. Negative decks. Maybe he doesn't even get played that often, but I don't even care. I think he's so toxic for the design space of the game. And then just also anytime people want to make custom cards or anything, it's just like super frustrating. So I'm fine with both of these cards disappearing. It says reworks, but maybe it should say murders. I don't know. You guys let me know below. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of points of argument here and contention, but let's face it, they're just annoying cards. They're annoying cards to see in this game. All right, and then we got our series drops, series adjustments, right? So nothing too crazy here. I mean, here, series 5 to series 4, I feel like they all need to drop aside from Thanos and Galactus. I feel like they want to leave those as permanent series 5 cards, but all of these cards should drop and they should let us know in advance. You know, like if somebody drops 6k tokens and then it changes a week later, like I'm nervous to get a Shuri, for instance. I have her pinned in my shop. Imagine I got enough tokens in the next day or so, and then I bought Shuri, and then literally when the season rolled over, oh, she's series 4 now. Like buyer's remorse like crazy. Why don't we just avoid that and let the public know, hey, if you wait, it's going to be discounted. But if you want to play with the card now, you can pay the premium now. I feel like that's fair. It should happen in my opinion. And then also for series 4 to series 3, same deal, you know, that's still a lot of tokens. Now, the thing I wasn't too sure about here is when you go from series 4 to series 3, how do you determine what cards do drop and what cards don't? Leave a lot? Do you only drop 1 or 2? I put all the cards that are kind of just feel like fillers to me, except for maybe Titania Atuma. I know they can be pretty cool and do their thing. But like Agent Coulson, Maria Hill, M'Baku, Helicarrier, like they're kind of like, there's random effects. It's just, you know, they're not that exciting. Like, why would you drop 3k tokens on these? The few that I admitted were like She-Hulk and Absorbing Man, you know, like those are like some really meta-defining, impactful cards. So maybe they stay at series 4, but then it kind of feels bad if you only bring down the ones that aren't that good, because then it's like saying, hey, we want you to pay to win, get these good cards, spend the tokens on them. So I don't know how they're going to manage this. I'm going to be really curious to see if there are any series adjustments in this upcoming patch, upcoming season, but we'll see. And then in series 3, I think cards should routinely drop from series 3 to 2, but not too many, because I think it's pretty healthy the way it is. But there's some cards I'd like to see, like Patriot. It'd be super cool if like a lot of the new players had the opportunity to actually use the Thing, Hulk, Abomination, you know, use those no ability cards, because you can't really, at the end of the day, you can't do it until you get Patriot. And Patriot might be one of your last Series 3 cards, which takes forever. It's an entire archetype. I feel like he has to be in Series 2. It just makes sense to me. Another one is Death. Destroy decks are kind of meh until you get like later on in Series 3 and you collect a few tools. I think it'd be fun at least to have Death and then experiment with things like by destroying Bucky Barnes, your Squirrel Girls with Killmonger, that kind of thing. And then Death becomes an option. And the last one would be Electro. I put Electro here just kind of as a placeholder for any ramp option. There's no ramp in Series 1 or 2. It becomes a thing in Series 3, and I think it'd be nice to have at least one option out there to be able to ramp up into like 2 6-drops, so you can play 1 on 5 and 1 on 6. And I think Electro is the most balanced. He has a downside on his ongoing ability, so players have to kind of learn about the downsides of some cards, but then the bonus of having additional energy every turn. I think that's a very fun card for new players to experience, and that they're probably going to look at it and think it's really bad, but then find out later that it can be really good in the right deck. Anyways, guys, those are my patch predictions for the buffs, nerfs, balance changes overall. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. We are a few short days away from the new season. I'm super fired up. We're going to cover this all live, balance changes, new cards, all that good stuff. I cannot wait. I hope you have a great new year. Thank you for supporting this channel. I super appreciate it. It has been a fantastic year, and I'm enjoying every second of it with you guys. So, like always, I will catch you guys next year.